Episode 7 Icarus.
Next morning a shaking servant ran to the royal chambers of Minos. King and queen dressed themselves. Minos passed a window and stopped. The sky was black. Smoke rising from the harbour. His daughter's bed was empty. Theseus! His ship had gone and the fleet had been destroyed! At the labyrinth, stuck on a spike, they found the dripping head of the Minotaur, writhing with flies. King Minos ground his teeth with fury. Queen Pasiphae cradled the head of her dead son and wept. Soldiers were sent to the chambers of Daedalus. They burst in to find the inventor and a boy who looked so like him he had to be his son. Both were dragged to the king. Minos cried, "You did this. Only you know the secrets of the labyrinth. Now my daughter has gone with Theseus and my fleet is at the bottom of the harbour. For this betrayal I will punish you and your child." Daedalus fell to his knees. "Please, your highness, don't put us in that awful place." "So, you will suffer in a maze of your own making. While you rot in the dark, remember this. One day my men will come, and then you and your boy will suffer such agony you will beg me for your death." Father and son were thrown into the labyrinth. Once he was out of sight, Daedalus pulled out from under his robe a clump of candles. He lit them with flints. He told his boy to gather feathers. Daedalus caught a pigeon. It trembled in his hands. Daedalus stretched out a wing. He took the farthest feather between his finger and thumb and pulled. The bird shrieked. Daedalus opened his hand. The bird could still fly. Daedalus caught it again. He pulled out the same feather from the other wing. And then another feather, and another. Daedalus studied the bird's attempts at flight, and he learned much. Once again, Daedalus bent nature to his will. With the bones of the dead, and linen thread, and feathers and wax, he fashioned 2 pairs of wonderful wings. "Listen to me, my child. The sun has not yet risen. If you fly too low, the water will touch your wings and their sodden weight will drag you down. If you fly too high, the heat of the sun will melt the wax that binds feather to bone. Follow me. Ride the gusts I ride." With linen threads he tied the wings to his son's arms. Then he tied wings to his own. They went to the entrance. No sentry guarded it. There was no need. Minos controlled both land and sea. The only light came from the stars and the moon. They made their way to a cliff that overlooked the sea. The 2 of them ran to the edge of the cliff and beat the air. They rose. They rose into the cool sky. Every surging gust of wind made Icarus cry out with joy to be so free. For years he'd hidden away for fear of the anger of Minos. Now, stars above him, the ocean below, he could see islands in every direction, dark shapes against the horizon. He turned his head and craned his neck. Crete was disappearing. Another gust was lifting him. Icarus remembered his father's warning, but he also heard the voices of the gods and goddesses. Hermes whispered, "How does he know how high too high is?" Owl-eyed Athene whispered, "How do you know?"
What would you have done? How do you know when you've gone too far?
Icarus swooped and climbed and swooped and climbed. He saw blue, then a band of orange. The sun was rising. He passed over island after island, some no more than rocks in the sea, some peopled with fields and farms. Farmers and shepherds below gazed and gaped. One man working on his roof looked up, gasped and toppled from his perch. Even the seagulls seemed astonished. A great gust lifted him higher and higher. He laughed at the little figures so far below. he saw a fluttering feather falling, then another. He lifted his head to see the bird that was shedding them, but there was only the immense sun above. He looked down again, a shower of feathers falling. Daedalus looked back to check on his son, and saw only the empty sky. He looked down. There were feathers on the sea. Then he saw the corpse, lifting and falling on the surges of water. He flew to the nearest island and found a fisherman's boat. He lifted the dripping corpse out of the ocean. And ever since, that body has been known as the Icarian Sea.
For 3 days Theseus journeyed north and north and north again, and at last he saw the cliffs of his homeland, the cliffs of Athens, looming over the horizon. And as he drew closer, he saw there were figures standing on the cliffs. And as he drew closer still, he saw one of the figures falling, flailing, plunging, tumbling through the air. He heard a distant, keening cry of sorrow, and he looked up. He looked above his head, and the sails of the ship were black. He had forgotten to swap black sails for white sails, and his father, King Aegeus, seeing the black sails, thinking his son was dead, had thrown himself down from the cliff. Soon Theseus could see his body bobbing, lifting and falling in the waves. He lifted the body of his father onto the deck of the ship. He knelt beside it. His tears splashed down into his father's face, and for the first time he knew sorrow. And from that day to this, that sea, that body of water, has been called the Aegean Sea.
At that moment across the sea, Daedalus was burying his son. As he did so, he was aware of a bird, swooping, plunging, as if mocking him, as if copying Icarus's terrible fall. Daedalus lifted his head and looked, and saw it was a lapwing. And Daedalus remembered his nephew Talos, whom he had murdered, who had been transformed into a bird by owl-eyed Athene.